Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Hi, and welcome back to Your Family Dog. I'm Julie Fudge Smith, and I'm here with the incomparable Tina Spring. And today we're going to do a short little thing on rotational feeding. What is that, and why would you possibly want to change your dog's food if everything's being so successful? Well, there's lots of reasons why you might want to change your dog's food or rotate it. And Tina's going to start us off with the initial explanation as to what rotational feeding is and the initial idea about why you might want to do it.
Well, I had ChatGPT help me on it. So rotational feeding involves switching between different types of pet foods regularly and has lots of pros and cons. And so we'll talk about both of those. Sometimes it's rotating between manufacturers. That's a little bit more tricky than rotating within different protein sources or formulas for the same manufacturer. So I think it's important to talk about that it does reduce the risk of food sensitivities in our pets. So being able to have more flexibility in what their body is comfortable with can be a big benefit to not have a dog with quite so touchy a digestive tract. Other benefits might be just dietary variety provides more interest and enrichment for your pet. So, and potentially getting them a wider range of nutrients and vitamins and minerals, which could arguably help with overall health. And the proponents of rotational feeding say that that is part of the magic of doing rotational feeding. Can you think of some other benefits, Julie?
Well, one of the things I was thinking about is that my nutritional needs have changed over time. Okay, I'm 66 years old, and my body does not perform or need the same kind of nutrition it did when I was 16. So, I'm conscious of adding supplements and things into my diet that maybe I wouldn't have thought about 10, 20 years ago, or 60 years ago, as the case may be, or 50 years ago. So one of the things that I have found with rotational feeding is that as my dogs, as they grow up and as they change, and I feel like I should be looking at how the food they're eating matches their lifestyle or the stages in their life. So, what I feed a puppy is not the same thing as to what I'm going to feed my adult dog or my senior dog. And I think that rotational feeding allows you to try a wider variety of foods and not to feel as though I'm always going to stick with this particular food, which may be good for a certain period of time in your dog's life, but not might be good all the time. The other thing I have found too is that, I think you mentioned it, is that one of the things that I do want to avoid is my dog developing a sensitivity to any particular ingredient. And so what I have found with rotational feeding is that my dogs tend to not develop sensitivities as much because they're not exposed for a long period of time to something that may be a slight irritant to them. The other thing I like about it is by rotating protein sources, I also keep available protein sources that we may need at a different time. Like, for example, I had my daughter had a friend whose dog had worms, lost a lot of weight, and the dog's the worm's been taken care of. The dog's in good shape now, but it's skinny. And the vet suggested they put it on kangaroo meat because it's a higher fat meat and will help the dog gain weight a little bit faster, but not so fast as to hurt the dog. So, but I like having these exotic proteins available for particular stages in my dog's life. And by rotational feeding, I feel as though I am finding out what they tolerate, what they can't tolerate, and it keeps those sensitivities to particular proteins down. So that's one of the reasons why I really like rotational feeding.
Proponents also talk about that it can have lots of benefits to the gut microbiome, that by having adjustments to feeds that can build a more robust gut microbiome. And it mimics a more natural diet. Now, I don't know, two of my dogs would have been hunting and scavenging for things at different seasons. I don't know that my Doberman necessarily would be out running with a pack of wild Doberman pinchers trying
Or
to
my
find
Shih Tzu
bunnies.
at the time. Like, I think Bilbo's philosophy was like, I'm cute enough, someone will adopt me. I mean, I'm not.
Right. I'll just throw myself on the mercy of the court. So,
Yeah.
so, so, so these are all kind of the benefits that people who do rotational feeding talk about. That there's always gaps in a food. I think that's probably true. There probably always are little gaps here and there. And by doing rotational feeding, you're bringing in kind of more vigor to the overall systems. People who don't like it talk about digestive unrest. Um, my experience is that tends to happen when we make changes too quickly. So, we finish this bag of food from manufacturer A, and now we switch to something completely different from manufacturer M. And it's so different that the dog's gut isn't robust enough to be able to handle that without a hitch in the giddy up. They also talk about that it requires careful planning. Um, the people I know who do rotational feeding have made it very simple, so I've not found that was something that was
Yeah,
super
I was going to
scary.
say, I've been a rotational feeder for years and have never found it required. Well, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I've never found that it's been all that difficult.
I do wonder how it would work with Dovey, right? Because we know that there are some sensitivities there. So, figuring out which proteins I can rotate through and not have him have issues with it might be a little bit of a sticky wicket, and it might push me into feeding from different manufacturers instead of just the same manufacturer. Um, some people claim that it's not that there's an increased cost, which I don't, or like I have to buy pet food anyway. Pet food is expensive no matter how you slice it, whether you're doing freeze-dried raw or whether you're doing kibble or whether you're doing fresh food or you're making a dog food. All of those things, like, I don't know that the cost is necessarily higher. So
No,
that's an interesting thing that they mentioned
well,
as
you
a
know what I would
con.
say is that maybe it becomes expensive if you switch from, for lack of a better term, perhaps a more, what I consider to be an inferior kibble, something that has more fillers in it. If you switch to a higher quality food that has fewer fillers, apparently
Blah,
it's
blah,
a very
blah.
difficult word to say, and has a more consistent source of proteins and maybe a limited ingredient food, then yes, you're talking about more money. But you're also talking about more concentrated nutrition. So you feed less than you do with food that has a lot of fillers. And so I think overall, I don't think that the
So,
cost is that's not much of a consideration for me, is what I guess.
right. I mean, so my group classes are held in a training space in a retail shop, a wonderful retail shop who I love. Um, Honestly, the price for low quality feeds has gone up, has skyrocketed.
It
And
has.
so it, the price difference, like, there's not really that big a price difference between something you and I would consider um, an inferior quality and something you and I would consider a higher quality. I want as clean and as least processed a food as possible without a bunch of junk in it that's potentially going to contribute to issues in the future. So,
I agree.
um,
I think it's
I mean,
junk food in, junk behavior, junk, coming out the
health,
other end. And I
right.
feel that part of my obligation here to my dogs is to give them as good a quality of life as I can provide. And that includes feeding them with the best possible foods that I can afford to do and that I can do for them. Because ultimately, building a better dog from the ground up and maintaining that good health with good quality food and supplements means I have lower vet bills. And I'd much rather invest on the front end than try to invest on the rear end, fixing a problem that perhaps could have been either minimized or avoided because I built a better dog from the front end up.
So you talk about that you've done rotational feeding for years. How do you do it? Do you do like a regular base feed and then you change things that go in your slurry that you're adding to the feeds?
That's a really good question. I actually haven't done slurry for a while. I kind of rotated out of slurry when we moved last year because it was like really hard to produce slurry when you're in the middle of a move.
Right.
And Zuzu went to spend some time with her breeder when we were in Kyrgyzstan, and she put her on a raw diet. So I thought, well, instead of creating the slurry, maybe I'll stick with the raw. So she's had a combination of freeze-dried food, Noble freeze-dried food, and Instinct raw. However, I'm a little concerned now. I've been using frozen raw. Both of the dogs have done quite well with the combination. And then I have various supplements that I add in. But what I'm thinking, actually, I'm rotating out of the Instinct right now and rotating into, now after our last episode on bird
Now
flu,
you have to rethink it all.
I have to rethink it all because
On
I put them on
bird
a duck food, on a duck
Well,
protein.
right.
But so now I'm like, but it's processed. But one of the reasons why I'm switching out and I'm in the process of rotating, and one of the things that I do when it comes time to rotate, I tried to think in advance, where do I want to go? What protein source do I want to use this time? And I try to change over slowly so we don't have digestive upset. There are times we do have digestive upset, but you know what? Usually it's just a couple of days and we're done. But what I would say this time in switching over to the duck, Zuzu, who's 9.5, had a little bit of protein in her urine. Nothing to be terribly concerned about, but it could be an indication that there's something going on with her kidneys. So one of the supplements I have added in is I now make her tea every day out of nettles, which is helpful for kidney function. But he asked me to look at the protein sources, and the Instinct has too much protein for her. So the Noble, when you do, you have to figure out dry weight protein as opposed to, there's this calculator you can use that takes out the moisture and Noble comes in right where she needs to be with the protein source. So she's been off of the raw, but then I also have some duck kibble, which is a little bit higher protein, but she has a lower amount of that. So for me right now, it's trying to give her a little bit of diversity of proteins as well as reducing the amount of protein, but keeping up the overall nutrition. And in general, I have not rotated as much lately because when I settled on Noble, I was so happy with the way in which my dogs looked and acted and their overall health on Noble that I haven't been super eager to change out. I will sometimes change protein sources within Noble. Right now, I think we're on chicken, and I've gone to various other protein sources within Noble, but I really have been so pleased with the way in which the dogs have just thrived. Really,
no, I love Noble. It's wonderful.
But I do like,
and my dogs really love it.
They do. Yeah, my dogs do too. But I do like to provide, and then I will provide, then I also throw in other things, other supplements. Like they get some yogurt, and as I said, Zuzu gets her nettle tea, and they get probiotics every day, and they get a vitamin, and they get a joint supplement, and Zuzu
I throw in kefir sometimes. Sometimes they get cottage cheese.
He had kefir last week.
Like I kind of mix and match and see kind of what's going on in the universe, and then they get other stuff, especially like the Doberman is my one that it's like real. It's difficult to keep weight on him. So
we get a lot of
really
blueberries and carrots and green beans and that kind of stuff, supplementing it as well. So they never have exactly the same meal twice.
Right. And I will include in the show notes that the link for Noble for
Yes.
those who are interested in learning more about that feed. I love how transparent that company is about all
Yes.
of the nutrition and their sourcing, and even will compare it to other products on the market and tell you like that product is comparable and it's a little less expensive. Like I love an honest company that makes my heart sing. I will
Right.
also share with you so if you put in "sit happens," all one word, as a coupon code, you get a decent little discount. So
Yeah, you
I
can
will
do it
share
with I
everyone.
think through my website too. I think it's APC or something. But yeah, so we can
Right.
put both of those codes. So yeah, I just have been really happy with Noble. And like I said, I thought that their protein
Yes.
was too high, but when you figure it out, they've got a nice fat balance as well. And I feel like a lot of foods are a little bit low on fat, and I think
Hmm.
I think that's one reason why my dogs have gorgeous coats is because I make sure they get enough fat in their diet.
Right. So most of the people I know who do rotational feeding, at least now, do it within the same manufacturer and the same line of formulation of a feed. So they might do a poultry, like whichever manufacturer you're using, they might use a poultry based um, and 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 then switch to like maybe a red meat base, and then maybe switch to a fish base, and then switch to one that's maybe more of a wild. So
Right.
lots
There's
of times we
one I
call it
think Origin has
wild
called
proteins.
Tundra, which has like
Right,
bison and and they also have
right,
a
or it
zebra one and or kangaroo meat and
right.
so
So
yeah.
so the people I know who do rotational feeding, like we're going to pretend that we just use I'm going to discuss it by bags. So let's say they're feeding their dog a poultry based feed. They're going to feed that bag that the dog's on. And the next bag they're going to buy is whichever protein they decide to switch to. When they open the next bag of the poultry, they're going to start mixing in the new protein that they're introducing. And they're going to do that over multiple weeks, right? It's a gradual transition for the dog. Usually their goal, the people I know who do rotational feeding, and if you do it differently, please let me know. Their goal is like a 50-50 mix by the middle of the bags, and then to be basically 100% on the new stuff by the time they get to that next bag. So they feed that protein, let's say it's fish, for 3 months. And as they're approaching that last month, they're transitioning onto the next protein. Is that kind of how you did it when
No,
you did
but
it?
I think that's a great way to do it.
Did you wing it? Is that what you
I
did?
kind of winged it, yes. Well, what I usually have found is that what I have generally found is that when I'm dealing with good quality food, I don't
The
have
dogs transition
nearly
well.
the
Yes.
transitions are not nearly as difficult. I find if I'm transitioning between brands, then yeah, I'm a little bit more careful, and I
Oh,
know.
yeah, that's a different thing.
But no, I have found that in general, if I'm feeding really good quality food, the transition between foods is generally pretty easy. And in fact, I just transitioned them to, now I'm panicking, the dock food. And
Ugh,
that I just add some in to Clemmy's now getting the frozen stuff and some into to Zuzu's Noble bars. And so it's just like she gets a quarter cup. And so I just, it just gets mixed
right,
in with the rest of it. So it's just a little bit different source of protein, keep things a little bit more interesting for her. This bag will, and their bags are on sale, so I went and bought a couple extra bags. These will last me
right.
for a while because I'm just slowly adding it in. Some days she gets a little, some days she gets a little more, some days she doesn't get any, but it's there in the mix. So I am
Yes.
truly
And
a
I will say,
bad
like, in the
rotational
case of
feeder.
the Doberman, right, he doesn't tolerate poultry well, but he loves rabbit, right? So I can do lamb, I can do rabbit, he will eat fish. He doesn't love it, but he'll eat it. And that gives him good omega-3s and omega-6s. So,
Yeah. Well, my dogs get fish oil every day. They get a fish oil supplement that I just squirt on a couple of pumps, and which was recommended to me by one of my holistic vets. And that has been a really wonderful addition. Because honestly, the fish dog food, the smell just about does me in.
right. It's
Just-
like you have
Oh,
It's like you have a sunfish that you caught in June that you knocked up under the couch and left it there. And here we are in
it's
January, still enjoying the
Yeah.
odoriferous essence de carp.
Yeah.
No,
So
it's bad. I mean, so
Just-
my dogs pretty regularly get fish skins. Like Jack loves fish.
yes.
So every once in a while, I'll give them as a treat in their crates, like fish skins. Just again, it's my version of rotational feeding. Like I'm going to throw you something weird and see how your body does with it. And and Jack is hysterical because when you go to hand it to him, he's super stoked. Like he's all bouncy and happy and smiling. And then he sniffs it and he makes this face that we call the fishy fish face. Right? Then he goes, "Oh, that's fishy fish." And then he play bows and grabs it and inhales it. So but he does. His first response is like, "Oh, that's disgusting. Give me more."
More. Yes.
Um,
It's going,
I'm
can
like,
I,
"Okay, you goofball."
I think Zuzu's first response is, can I roll in it first? So that,
Right. Like
so
I
that I
often
smell
think,
like
like,
it?
thank goodness. Yes, like thank goodness I give it to him in his crate so he's not rolling in it in the backyard because I do not put it past that dog to do that.
Yeah.
And then my whole house would smell like fishy fish. But
Yeah.
that is literally what we call it, fishy fish. Which is funny because if I rotate to feeding him like a heavily fish-based food, he thinks that's a terrible idea. Like he doesn't know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
No,
But
but I will give the dogs fish skins and stuff. I will also give them meat scraps of things that I've cooked, but I'm really careful about the amount of fat that I like. If I did a lamb roast a couple weeks ago, and it was really good, but that surface fat, that all gets trimmed off because the one thing I don't want to risk is pancreatitis. So while I want a sufficient amount of fat in the food, I want an appropriate amount. And you need to be super careful if you're feeding scraps that you don't give them too much fat. And what I also found too is that the dogs will occasionally get marrow bones, and we had one burner that just loved them. But the marrow is also high in fat, and he got pancreatitis from those. So I had to be very careful about the number of marrow bones that I fed. And the other thing I find with Zuzu, when she gets a marrow bone, she worries it. So she I'll give it to her outside, and next thing you know, I'm finding it in the middle of my herb garden or my pansies or whatever. So she does enjoy that. But what I have found in general is that providing my dogs with a wide variety of foods makes them they seem to make them happy. They really like getting a variety of foods.
something
And
different.
it's something different. So I'm just stuck eating kibble all my life. But it also
Well,
too,
and the same flavor. But
yeah,
I mean, honestly, I think it's a good idea in the case of recalls, right? Or a manufacturing problem. Like, I don't know, if God forbid the feed I feed, if their manufacturing facility catches on fire, I don't I don't want to be panicked
right.
about, oh no, now what? Or if they have a full recall, oh no, now what? I've had a bunch of clients, like Purina's had a bunch of recalls lately, and families call me panicked that they're like, what do I feed my dog? And so the good news is that that opens up a conversation about some other options, but any dog food can end up with a recall. Like the last episode we recorded just before we're recording this one, we're actually recording two back to back on the same day, is about bird flu and how that avian flu is already impacting the pet food market, in particular cats. And I think most of us rotationally feed cats because cats are so dang picky that if you feed them, my cat anyway, if I feed him the same thing, unless it was rabbit, of course, the most expensive food he could find. But other than rabbit, he he won't eat everything all the time. So if we do too much turkey, he's like, I'm out. I'm not eating that. If I do too much fish, he doesn't like that either. He does like duck. He does seem to really like duck, but again, I'm feeding a cold pasteurized food so that hopefully we're eliminating the risk of health issues. Generally, freeze-dried raw is a safer way to go, understanding kind of how that process works and assuming that you trust your manufacturer.
Right. One thing that I have found too lately, my daughter was looking for a local source for food for her dog, and there's a little store here, and I don't know if they are elsewhere, but they're called Hollywood Feed, and
Oh, they're wonderful.
they are fabulous. I finally went there when I was told I had to get a lower protein source, and I honestly didn't want to go with Hills. I wanted to go with something that I considered to be a better quality food. So I thought, well, what the heck? One time I had called them and I said, I need a bag of dog food. And this was like at 3:00. By 5:00, it was delivered to my door. No delivery fee. So they're really, they do free delivery in a certain radius. But I went in to talk to him. Brad was in for his physical therapy for his shoulder. And so I said, well, I'm going to go over to Hollywood Feed because I need to look at some food. The guy spent probably 45 minutes with me just talking about foods and taking a look at stuff and helping me calculate protein content and saying, no, I don't think you should go there because I think you're going to find that's too high of protein content. And he was great. He was absolutely great. So that's also been really helpful is if you were thinking about rotating food, find a local food store with knowledgeable employees who can help you make some of these decisions. So if you've got a Hollywood Feed near you, I suggest you take a look at it because their employees, from what I can tell, are very highly educated and can be really helpful in helping you.
Yeah, I mean, Hollywood Feeds, I believe, is owned by Rodney Habib, who's the person who wrote The Forever Dog with Dr. Karen Becker. So that's kind of, I think, how that migration happened, that they're close and have a very similar worldview on we should be feeding our animals as well as we possibly can. So moral of the story, rotational feeding is something you might want to think about. There can be some downsides, right? It can be more complicated than just having, the same bag of food in your grocery cart each time you go. That being said, it also can be pretty flexible. So in my case, we rotate in different raws to go into our raw infused kibble because frankly, I can't afford to just feed my dogs what I want to feed them, which would be noble. But my dogs, that would be a substantial budget change. So they get a bunch of that, but that's not all they get. So that it's a little softer on my budget. So Julie, I want to thank you for making time today to do 2 recordings. I know that's a lot. We had started
it's
getting
fine if I didn't have to rush my husband off to work because he can't drive yet because he's still recovering from his rotator cuff surgery. Right. So I play chauffeur now. So I have to chauffeur him off to work so he can teach young legal minds how to think. So off I go. But anyway, thank you, Tina. It was a great discussion.
I hope they know how to think.
Topics. What?
I hope they know how to think. And I am gonna tease out. We're gonna soon have a new mom on, who her baby's about a year old, and we're gonna talk about how that transition has been from having 2 dogs to now adding a baby into the mix. And I thought that might be a fun thing to talk about, kind of how that went, how she expected it to go, at how it actually went, and what she wished she had known, because I think that would be good information for all of us.
I think that'd be great information. So thank you for the 2 great topics, Tina, and I will see you all next time on Your Family Dog.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.